were outside the cabin, and we could hear kids playing. Like what clearly sounds like kids playing. And so there are no houses there. So I'm confused still to this day as to what we were hearing. It sounded like children playing and yelling and stuff like that in the woods.
Welcome to Bigfoot Society. In this episode, we talk to Seth Breedlove, Ohio-based filmmaker and founder of Small Town Monsters. In this episode, we talk about what happened during the filming of Land of the Missing, the upcoming Monster Fest, and new updates to the Bigfoot Project. Find out this and more on this week's episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking with an old friend. I believe I could say old friend. We've chatted for quite a bit.
I've done my longest interviews with you. So
that's true. We had a 2-hour one back in the day.
No, I think there was close to 3 at one point.
Mr. Seth Breedlove from Small Town Monsters. How's it going today, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for talking to me because you're a busy man.
I'm just noticing right now, you've got so many toys in the background. What's your favorite toy in that, action figure, I should say, in that room?
No, you can call them toys. Courtney calls them dolls. Her daughter comes down here to mess with my toys because she likes to dress them and do their hair. That's where I'm at. My favorite, what do you mean? Favorite line or favorite individual toy?
If the room was on fire and you had to pick one up and run out with it so it didn't get burned down.
Tommy keeps his original Optimus Prime G1 in here. And so that would have to be the one that I saved. Not that he cares because he has a much better one that actually has joints that work and stuff. But he has a G1 down here that I bought him. So I'd have to save that. But I do like that Galactus in the background there. He's 3 feet tall.
That Gen 1 Transformer stuff, dude. Prior to Bigfoot Society, I used to be big into thrifting and reselling and all that stuff. That was my jam. You don't mess around with that Transformer stuff, dude. That goes for some crazy. That's some good investment stuff right there.
We have a toy. We're already off the rails, but we have a toy store.
We have a toy store. It was going to happen.
We have a toy store near here called Toys Time Forgot, which if I had time, I would totally take you to when you're up here for the event. But it's one of the most famous vintage toy stores in the world. Like toy collectors from Japan and stuff come over here to buy at this place. But I used to do articles on them for the newspaper. And we go in there once a week, usually on Tuesday night, and Tommy will pick out like 1 or 2 G1 Transformers from their case. That's our GM.
It's like Al's Toy Barn from Toy Story 2, right?
Yeah.
Like crazy stuff.
Too quick. Got to go around the horn. That's a line from Toy Story 2. Never mind.
I was like, oh no.
No, that's like in the scene where Ham is like hitting the control.
Oh, totally.
He keeps passing it. He goes, too quick. Got to go around the horn. For some reason, every week we repeat that while we're playing Fortnite. The STM folks.
I just lost half of my audience that's into Disney Pixar. Yeah, they're like, forget this guy. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Seth, let's chat about what's coming up in 30 days, man. There's something that I am psyched for, and I want to make sure that all my listeners know about. Tell me what's going on with Monster Fest in Small Town Monsters.
Back in 2015, we did an event in Minerva called Minerva Monster Day. We did it in 2015 and 2016. It was a small town festival, very much geared around like Bigfoot. We had Bigfoot speakers and that kind of stuff. And it was also like embracing the whole small town roots of STM. But we were supposed to do an event back in 2017. I don't know how many people remember this, but we had announced it. We had a poster. We had multiple posters. We had announced Lauren Coleman and Lyle Blackburn were speaking. We ended up canceling it because the town was just not helping with the event to the extent that I just walked away. But from that point on, I always wanted to do another event like that, but something that was much more geared around like the pop culture cons that I enjoy going to, but centered around cryptids. And obviously we have CryptidCon in Kentucky every year, and they're the OG. They've been doing it for quite a few. I've been at every event they've done. But as much as I love CryptidCon, I have yet to see a true like Comic-Con atmosphere surrounding cryptids. And so that was the whole impetus for doing this, was like, let's try to, like, all the way down to we're going to have an artist alley and that kind of thing. It very much is a Comic-Con, but centered around cryptids. And it really is also supposed to play to some of the things that I think are really important to the community and the growing popularity of the topic, which is podcasts. I've said before, like, I got into this because of podcasts. I used to do a medical billing job, and I just would sit there and listen to podcasts all day. And that's why I'm doing this today. To me, it's always been really important to have podcasters represented at this kind of stuff. And typically you guys get left out. I was left out when I did a podcast. I know how this is. But in terms of importance to the growth of these topics, like, you guys are at the top. No one else is doing on a weekly basis what you're doing in terms of propagating the subject. And so I wanted to bring in podcasters, which is why, like, Astonishing Legends is going to be there, Scott and Forrest and Jim Harold. Jim is like the godfather. He would balk at this, but he's the godfather of cryptid and paranormal podcasts to begin with. I wanted to create an event that I would actually want to go to. And on the record, I don't like going to these events. So I wanted to create an event that I would actually want to go to. Yeah. And so that's what we're doing.
It's such a cool, when I first heard of Monster Fest, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. I'm dropping everything and I am getting my ticket to go. And then Seth asked me to come out and do the podcast live, which was even better. So I appreciate that. I want to say that publicly. So listeners, this is just the little plug section for myself. If you want to hear probably one of the only times that Bigfoot Society will be doing an episode live, it's going to be at Monster Fest. And if you want to hear it with all the and the crazy snafus, that's going to be Monster Fest, because I edit those out. I spend hours editing every week. But just to let you know, I will be interviewing someone live. I'll be interviewing Martin Groves about his Land Between the Lakes Dogman encounter. It's going to be awesome.
Dude, what a rad pickup. That is not what I would have thought of.
I've been trying to get Martin for a long time, and it finally clicked. I was like, he's going to be at Hellbent Hauler's table. I got to just reach out and snag him. And he's like, yeah, let's do it, man. So I am pumped, and I'm going to pick up the VHS. Do you talk about that special edition VHS you guys are rocking at Monster Fest?
So I need to clarify some things. STM has grown to the extent that, like, the things that end up happening within the company, a lot of the time I'm like barely clued into. And so that VHS had gone all the way through to the point where it was in production before I was like brought in to have a part in it. Courtney and Jason Udis, who just came on as like he's been on for over a month. Jason's been tied into STM all the way back to 2016, but he's like my right-hand man at this point. And Courtney obviously is like the one helping spearhead everything from a financial standpoint and keeping us above water at all times.
She's great.
The VHS, we're doing it with a company called Crucial Blast, and they do these small run VHS runs. It's basically like there's only 300 copies of this VHS being printed. If you get it at the event, you're probably going to have it. If you don't get it at the event, you might not get it. We're thinking right now we're going to be able to sell some online, but we're only going to have 150 and they're selling 150 online. So there's only 300 copies of this going out. But it's a VHS copy of American Werewolves, which if you've seen the movie is like the perfect way to watch it would be VHS if you actually have a VCR. But even if you don't have a VCR, I've seen a lot of people that are like, why are you selling I have custom VHS of Ready Player One in here. So I like them just to display. So we're excited about that. But in addition to the VHS, which comes with like custom artwork on it and stuff, I did an extensive interview that will go inside the VHS, inside this little zine that will also come with the VHS, which has a few articles or essay, I think an essay written by the guy who actually is doing this. And then he also interviewed me. So both those things will be part of the VHS. So we're pretty pumped about the VHS. I've said VHS way too much, but.
Listeners, if you don't know what VHS is, you just look it up. It's like the whole Stranger Things thing and vintage and like your parents and grandparents, all that stuff. It's cool, guys. It's cool. But I am pumped to see that. The actual VHS tape. I'm all about it because I'm a kid of the 80s. The cool thing about Monster Fest is it's not just Saturday. Mm-hmm. What's going on Friday night?
Friday night, we're showing On the Trail of Bigfoot, Land of the Missing at the Canton Palace Theater. But I will say we're also doing, I just want to mention this now because I might forget because I have a feeling we're going to end up talking about Land of the Missing. So following the Land of the Missing premiere, and by the way, as of right now, we're in the process of signing this movie back over to 1091. There's also a chance we're going to self-distribute it. I've been fighting with them for 2 days, which has been a blast. But the movie is not actually supposed to come out until August. So not only are you seeing a premiere, but you're seeing a premiere like 2 months before the movie will be available.
Wow.
However, Kickstarter backers should be getting Land of the Missing, Dogman Triangle, and the Dogman Triangle hardcover. I'm talking like sometime this month. So that's another perk to being a Kickstarter backer. But anyway, following the premiere, we are going to do Q&A with some of the people that are at the event, which I believe does include you, correct?
Yeah. Again, Courtney was like, do you want to be up there? And I was like, yeah, I will. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we're going to do a Q&A with some of the people that are going to be guests at the event. And the Q&A is going to center around general Bigfootery and probably just cryptozoology in general. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of references to missing people and like that kind of thing. But yeah, the premiere is at the Canton Palace Theater on June 2nd. I think it's at 6:30. I'm not positive about that. I think it's at 6:30. Canton Palace Theater, which is at one time was the largest screen in Northeast Ohio. I know for a fact that it is still the largest screen in the city of Canton. So it's a classic movie house. The guy that was the architect of these theaters did 50 of them around the United States, and the Palace is one of the only ones remaining. The one in Canton. It's decorated to look like you're in a Spanish garden. We actually did an episode of On the Trail of Hauntings there because it's also supposedly haunted. We experienced nothing. I don't believe it's haunted personally, but it's a really great place to see a movie. There's stars and clouds that move across the ceiling. So it's really cool. But yeah, and the movie, can we talk about this movie? I haven't talked about this movie, and I'm wrapping it up, and I want to.
Oh, you haven't talked about it yet?
I have yet to talk to anybody about this movie, but I'm.
Oh my dude, let's talk about it for a while. Yeah, let's talk. Okay, so let me say this first. So you sent me the trailer, through the DMs, and I watched it today, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be way more intense than I thought. This is going to be great. It's going to be one of those that I think is going to get on the radar of a lot of people.
Some of Alex's have done crazy. like crazy numbers in terms of viewing. The story of how this movie came to be is actually much more interesting to me than a lot of the other stuff we've made. We set out to just make a single movie about Alaska called Last Frontier. And it was just going to be about the history of Bigfoot in Alaska and Bigfoot sightings and First Nations people in Alaska and that kind of thing. I've always wanted to go to Alaska, and we ended up being there for 17 days. While we were in Alaska, we ended up shooting close to 20 interviews. And that's way more than can fit in one movie, realistically. What ended up happening is we had just an insane amount of content between what Alex and Eli were doing out of Area A and then what they also did while they were driving up to meet us in Healy. So they did 3 episodes of Beyond the Trail in Alaska. And by the way, I can make another announcement on this episode that has not been announced yet about Alex and Alaska and Eli in Alaska, actually, as long as we're talking about all this. But so we were filming so many interviews that it became obvious we were going to have too much content to make one movie. We needed to make 2 movies. But then the question became like, what is the movie we're making? Like every interview we were doing, especially with like Indigenous people, was really hinting at a much darker lore surrounding Sasquatch and stuff other than Sasquatch in Alaska. And the kind of stuff that I've wanted to delve into within the series and be able to do it from a personal standpoint. That's what ended up happening. We really got into the missing people topic as the shoot went on. Organically happened within making the movie, which I've never had that happen. I've never been making a movie and then have another movie just come into focus as we're making another movie. We ended up, while we were driving, this is midway through the shoot, while we're driving from like the coast up to, what is that area called? So there's 5 regions, and this would be the Arctic, subarctic, the Arctic. So basically, once you get up near Denali, we're driving from Homer up to Denali. Heather booked us an interview with a guy who had a connection to a young boy who was supposedly taken by a Sasquatch. And so once that happened, I was like, okay, the second movie is going to finally be my chance to look at missing people and the sort of the darker side of Sasquatch through the lens of Alaska. And so that's what it has become. So the movie is it's certainly about missing people. It's about violent, aggressive Bigfoot encounters, which is very important in that state. A couple of the ones we had are some of the most insane. One of them from Fred Roll it's wild. Like it's on another level when it comes to Sasquatch encounters. So I'm looking forward to getting that in front of camera or in front of audiences. But I was able to, with that series, with On the Trail of Bigfoot, it's me looking at the subject of Bigfoot, but it's supposed to be from personal standpoints. I'm allowed to comment directly on it and like give my own perspective on this kind of stuff. And I have very specific thoughts about the missing people topic, and a lot of people capitalize on it. I was able to come at it from that perspective and put my own stamp on it and do it in a way that I feel is personal. I think it's respectful to the people who have gone missing and their families. And also maybe look at it in a way that I hadn't looked at the subject before. And when you get into interviewing Cliff Barrickman and he's putting weight behind it, like it changes your mind on the whole thing. But every single person we interviewed believes that Sasquatch is somehow responsible for some number of missing people reports. And so that's the movie really I mean, it straight up just dives into that from the go. It isn't just about Squatch. There is a section in the movie where I was able to delve into some of the other cryptids that exist in Alaska. There's a ton. Like, people claim to see woolly mammoths up there. That's not in the movie. I wish it was, because I have interview segments where people did talk about that. But it at that point, it really did start to feel like a completely different movie. So that little section got cut. We do talk about like giants, the concept of undiscovered tribes that live in some of the really remote areas, the idea of devil monkeys, which is a really common. There's two ways to approach that too. One is there's this idea of like ice monkeys that live over there, or snow monkeys. But then there's also the idea of like small people. There's a lot of lore connected to like little people that live in the woods who come and take people. What's weird is so much of the lore over there does somehow reflect a fear of being taken, or directly reference being taken by something. So if it isn't Bigfoot taking people, it's like little people or these undiscovered tribes who take people for a period of 7 years. There's all this stuff that's really weird. A lot of it is just in reference to a fear of going into the woods. And so the movie delves into all that. It also gets into UFOs and the Dark Pyramid, or the Black Pyramid, in Denali, because we were like right near Denali. When we were in Healy, I actually stayed. My backyard at the primitive cabin I stayed in was Denali National Park. So when I would walk out my door in the morning, I was looking at Denali National Park, and there was no one near me when I was staying there. There was no one within 2-3 miles. There's other cabins on that property, but when I was there, it was not tourist season. And so no one was staying there except me. And I did hear some stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't catch audio, but in the movie, you'll hear me talk about, or I heard the like baby crying stuff.
Oh, you did? Oh, man.
Yeah, I heard the baby crying stuff, and I heard some strange. What was weirder, we heard the baby crying stuff for sure, but we had multiple instances that were really odd there. One of them was Courtney and I were there one night. We had just dropped the group off and gone back to the cabin. We were hanging out at the cabin. Mm-hmm. We were there during the time of year where it's never dark, so it's always light outside. So we're outside the cabin. It's about 11 o'clock at night, but it looks like it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're outside the cabin, and we could hear kids playing. Like what clearly sounds like kids playing. There are no houses there. So I'm confused still to this day as to what we were hearing. It sounded like children playing and yelling and stuff like that in the woods. There were a ton of moose at that property, which is actually in Alaska much more terrifying than bear, because moose will just screw you up. I was going to do an episode of the Bigfoot Project out at this cabin, and just never happened. But one other thing, and I haven't talked about this anywhere, but there was a night where we were out at the cabin, and a black SUV pulled in and just hung out. And so I ended up calling Alex and Eli, and they came down because they were up the road, which, by the way, their cabin was on Stampede Road, which, if anyone knows about, Chris McCandless disappeared on Stampede Trail right down the road from Stampede Road. So where their Airbnb was within 2 miles of where Chris McCandless was last seen. So when the movie opens with Alex, Eli, and I, we're actually on Stampede Trail. We're right at the spot where Chris McCandless would have been dropped off, which I know this is referenced in Alaskan Coastal, but like that to me is the most famous missing persons case in Alaskan history. He did show up, obviously. He was dead. But like when you think of Alaska, a lot of people think of Chris McCandless. And so that state is just inherently tied to missing people. And there is a Bigfoot connection via the lore to a lot of that stuff. I tried to be as objective about it as I could be. I also think you said today you can't wait to see it like on the big screen.
No, for sure.
Oh, you have no idea. Like, I never used, for whatever reason, I'm not real clear on why I did this, but I barely used any of our helicopter footage in Last Frontier. And so this thing is just loaded with it. So we have really crazy, like, aerial shots of forests and rivers and mountaintops and like all kind of stuff in here. Borderline National Geographic level kind of stuff. So seeing it on a big screen, and it probably won't, the way things go with STM, it probably won't screen on a big screen again. Like, seeing it at the Palace is going to be crazy. I'm really excited to have this one in front of an audience just because it is a little different from the typical On the Trail of Bigfoot. Because in On the Trail of Bigfoot, I typically in front of the camera walking around in like these places and we're doing Bigfoot hunts or whatever. There's less of that in these Alaskan ones, but there's a reason for that. We interviewed so many people, and then also it was never dark. So it's not, what are you going to, most people want to see us out in the woods after dark because it's spooky. It's not dark. Like, I'd go to bed at 1 a.m. and you wake up at 6 and it's the same level of brightness outside. I'm excited to get the movie out there. And it feels to me, these Alaskan ones, I don't know if other people, maybe not both the Alaskan ones, but I feel like it's funny. I thought Last Frontier would be the really personal one. And it is to some extent, like I dedicated it to my mom and stuff, but this one almost feels more personal in a way, which you'll see once you watch it why that might be. But this one and Journey to me very much feel like film versions of Sasquatch. That's because it's all there's a lot of me like ruminating on the topic and like where I feel like we're going wrong or right with this stuff.
Newer listeners might not know, but Seth and Mark Madsky used to have a Bigfoot themed podcast called Sasquatch, which is what's incredible. And Andy was involved too. I have a few follow-up questions. So what happened with the black SUV? Or
all
if
right.
you
so no, I can tell you. So the way this happened is I was staying at a primitive cabin in the middle of nowhere. Okay. So like middle of the night, I get up and walk outside in nothing but a pair of boxers to take a leak. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at the ground or something. I don't know what I was doing, but I was not looking straight ahead. And when I looked up, I was facing the van, or this SUV, not a van, this black SUV that shouldn't be there. I messaged the landowner and asked if someone had come back there, and they were like, no. So this SUV was just sitting there. I quickly ran inside, called Alex and Eli. And at some point between when Alex and Eli got down there and when I called, this SUV left. So by the time they got down there, it was gone. The weird thing was that night I just had a weird vibe. I don't talk lightly about that kind of stuff. I'm not into vibes or whatever, but I had a weird sense that night. The only other night that I was staying there where I had an equally weird sense was there was a night where Courtney was down there with me, and we had gone out on the front porch and the door shut. And when the door to the cabin shut, it has an automatic lock. And when the door to the cabin shut, we had, for some reason, both left our phones inside. So it locks.
Oof.
I'm not wearing shoes, and she wasn't either. And so we're outside in Alaska. We don't have a car key. It's in the house. There aren't really windows to the cabin. There isn't really like a way we could break a window out and sneak back. It's a primitive, like it's a hunting cabin.
Wow.
So we're out in Alaska with no knowledge. We could not remember what the code was to get back in the house. And I ended up considering running 2 miles down the road to the other Airbnb to see if they could get us inside barefoot in 30-degree weather. Thankfully, somehow Courtney remembered the code and we did get back inside. So that was one of our scarier incidents. But yeah, nothing came of the SUV and nothing came of the cries we heard or the sounds we heard. And I'm pretty upfront about that. Like the movie opens with that.
Okay.
Like typical Bigfoot stuff, nothing happens.
Wow.
But it was weird and it somehow felt like the right way to open the movie. Just like hinting at the idea that when you're in Alaska, Healy is, by the way, Healy's a tiny town, but you're only probably 15 minutes from the entrance to Denali National Park, which is a very touristy area in at least in Alaskan terms. There's a couple resorts there. There's some restaurants and things like that. Where we were down in Healy is much less touristy. But no matter where you are in Alaska, you're going to, at some point, you are going to feel eerily isolated. And when you actually put yourself in a situation where you are completely isolated, which I did with that primitive cabin, had no running water. We had electricity, but no running water. And we were probably 2-3 miles from the closest house. In a place where there's giant brown bears running around. There's moose crap all over the property where we were. There's lynx walking. We saw a lynx the one day driving out. There's everything there can kill you. You feel that isolation really well. I am a huge fan of that Into the Wild story. When the book came out, I was working for my parents, and I can remember sitting at my parents' store and reading the book when I should have been working before the movie even came out. And then the movie came out, and I watched the movie, and I love that. So that story has always spoke to me. Land of the Missing ends with a quote by Jack London. And like when I was a kid, Alaska was my thing. That was what I wanted to do. That was where I wanted to go, was like, that was my bucket list place. That was the main reason we ended up staying there for 17 days. We didn't actually need 17 days to film a movie. We can film a movie in 4 days, but yeah, I've always wanted to go to Alaska. And now Alex and Eli are both doing more there.
I am even more excited to see this movie. And so guys, if you want to see, this is going to be amazing on the big screen. All the info for Monster Fest is over at smalltownmonsters.com.
Alex is doing a full season of a show. We have not yet decided if this will be something that happens again or if it's a miniseries one-off. He's going to be doing multiple episodes at Area A, and it's not Beyond the Trail. It's something a little more personal. It's going to be directly from Alex's POV, and it's going to be all set at Area A. He's going to be in Alaska. He's going to be on the way to and from Alaska and in Alaska for around 6 weeks. Coming up right after Monster Fest, when he leaves Monster Fest, he's driving to Alaska. So once he's in Alaska, he's going to Area A. He's doing the Boreal Bigfoot Conference, and then he'll go to Area A, and he'll be at Area A, parked at Area A for 2+ weeks, making an entire show based around Area A.
That's incredible. Wow.
He's also doing multiple episodes of Beyond the Trail in Alaska that aren't directly at Area A. This new series is not going to be like a thing where we're canceling Beyond the Trail in the meantime or putting it on a hiatus. Beyond the Trail is going to continue, and this is going to run concurrent. I can just tell you, as of like August, there's going to be one thing a week, like one big series a week coming out on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
Eli will definitely be shooting Mysteries and Monsters up in Alaska as well. So both of them are going to be doing their own separate things up in that neck of the woods. And then sometime in August, actually, I think the way we have it planned is some of Alex's stuff might start hitting in July, but you'll start seeing a large chunk of stuff from us popping up on our YouTube around August, where it'll be like a weekly big series. Because we also have Sasquatch Unearthed in West Virginia coming out starting later this month.
That is incredible. Oh man, I just can't imagine. Because like Area A, holy mackerel, you know that the stuff didn't stop happening once Alex and Eli and Ron and all those guys left that area. It's still going on right now, and that is amazing that Alex is going to be up there for that amount of time. It's almost like a NAWAC situation with Area X, where it's like you get them in there for a long time, past the normal time where the Sasquatch think they're going to leave, and then that's when the crazy stuff really starts.
Well, I don't think they do leave. And I think this is why this kind of thing.
I mean that when, let's say, the people visiting the area leave, not the Sasquatch are there. They're not leaving. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's why this kind of thing is actually a much more realistic approach to actually trying to find answers than chasing sighting reports. I had the same thing happen in Minerva. It's just, it happened for a very specific reason at that period of time. I think we've nailed down why it happened at this point. The neighbor, I don't want to get off on a tangent though, because you're
no, please. I'd be very interested as to what you had figured out.
So yeah, for listeners who don't know, we did a series called Bigfoot Project, the Bigfoot Project. Heather Mosier's family lives on a pretty sizable chunk of property outside of Minerva, Ohio, where there is a history of sightings going back some ways. We started going there not this past, but the previous September, and pretty much immediately had activity. We had a lot of activity, and it lasted a certain number of months and then just died, like completely died. There's nothing. So right before Heather notified me that there was strange stuff happening on the property, the neighboring property, which was far larger, a much larger chunk of forest, started being clear cut for ATV trails. Our assumption is that these things were trying to find a place to go. They headed over to this property where there is forest, but maybe not as dense. There's not as much like water. They end up on this property where I happen to be. Like, it's like the most coincidental thing, but it all fell into place. So like I end up there. We had activity. We started experiencing things in September. By November, the leaf canopy's down. There were still odd happenings, which is why we made 2 more episodes after the leaf canopy came down. But it was definitely dying off. Now they're clear cutting the pipelines.
Okay.
Within at Heather's property. And so literally, I wish I had the photo, but or a way to show you the photo, but even where I had my sighting is completely clear cut right now, and there are bulldozers all over the hill. It was like the right place, right time with all the construction happening on the property. There's also the fact that in the very first episode, Corey said that the guy that owns the property said that they're developing land on the other side of the hill from where the property is. I think these things happen actually far more frequently in states like Ohio than people realize. I think these things are far more prevalent, or were far more prevalent in Ohio and other states like Ohio than people realize, but they are getting pushed. I think they're getting pushed into more, they're constantly being pushed out of certain areas, like near where STM was previously located in Wadsworth. There were all these stories about the River Styx monster. And Mark DeWorth, who's like a Bigfoot investigator in Ohio, his uncle had a sighting near River Styx. If you go to River Styx today, I just drove through it in the last 2 weeks. It's completely developed, but it wasn't like that. Even in the last 10 years, it wasn't like that. So it happens fast. And I think when it happens, you see a natural sort of disappearance of the reports from that area. Right. And that kind of thing happens.
Exactly. If listeners haven't watched the Bigfoot Project yet, you need to go back a little bit and you need to take the time to watch it. It's very cool. And you get to see Seth book it after. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's pretty awesome. The whole series it's one of my favorites. There is one thing that I want to make sure that we touch on that we haven't really yet. And that is Monster Fest is so unique in that there are going to be guests there, people you've invited that will probably not go to one of these things again. I think people really need to get that this might be the one chance to meet some of these people and for them to have that connection. Do you mind sharing who some of the really unique individuals that you've invited to come to Monster Fest would be?
Lauren Coleman is going to be speaking and appearing at the event. Same with Stan Gordon, who's like a Pennsylvania researcher. He's going to be appearing and speaking. Cliff Barrickman from Finding Bigfoot. Richard Haddam, who is the screenwriter on Mothman Prophecies, will be there. Amy Boo, who is in the Olympic Project, and she's a really great Ohio-based researcher. She's going to be speaking. She'll be there. We're only having 4 speakers, which is why I'm mentioning this. The event is much more geared around your personal, like con goers' personal interaction with these people, rather than just focusing on listening to them. Lyle Blackburn's going to be there. He's not speaking, which to some people would be a surprise, but I want people to be able to go talk to Lyle.
I love it. Oh, yes.
Forrest and Scott from Astonishing Legends, Jim Harold, Shannon LeGros, Eli Watson, Alexander Pedikov, Aaron Deese, who just wrote the Texas Dogman Triangle book that is being published by Small Town Monsters. Mark Matsky will be there. Adam Dugan, who's been in a bunch of our movies. Jeremiah Byron, who you may have heard of from the Bigfoot Society podcast. And then me. But there's also Heather Mosier will be there. All the STM crew will be there, including Brandon Dalo, who we're flying in.
Which is awesome that you've got Brandon coming out. He's the music guy. If people don't know, he's the composer of the music that's in all of your favorite STM movies, etc.
Yeah, he'll be there. And his dad will be there, which his dad's running our AV. So his dad is like a legend in the Kenton music scene, by the way.
Nice.
But it is, it's the cancellation is Justin Chernopesky. It's not going to work out. So I have not yet figured out if I'm going to pull a surprise on everybody and get someone else involved. But as of now, that is our guest list. I should mention the live podcast room. There's a full-on live podcast room that will have multiple live podcasts, including Bigfoot Society, Sasquatch Experience with Sean Forker, Astonishing Legends, Jim Harold, and then Laura's show,
Spooks, Creeps, which is Assorted Devilry.
Yes.
Laura's.
The event's free for kids 12 and under. So we're doing there's going to be a scavenger hunt and other all ages friendly stuff.
Nice.
It's a family oriented event. I recently said this to the crew. At the end of the day, STM is supposed to be geared around family. It was from the beginning. And I don't want us to become lost in the shuffle of making scary movies and then forget about who our main audience is. I want kids to be able to get into this stuff. There's going to be a lot going on, but it's definitely a family-friendly event.
I'm so pumped. And listeners, is going to be the links to where to get this info in the show notes. If you want to go, it'll be less than 30 days. It's going to be a few days less than 30 days by the time this gets out. You need to immediately buy your ticket and immediately try to get a hotel room as quick as you can. Before we go, Seth, we have a few more minutes. One of the features you have coming out this year is your British Columbia project. Can you share maybe one little thing that you are just extremely excited about being able to do in British Columbia once you go out there?
Yeah. I know Mark was just at my house last week, and him and I were talking about this. The idea that where we're going is, when you look at it on a map and you look at the historical Bigfoot accounts, so much happened within that area that it's mind-blowing, because you've got, this is the place. So we're actually going to be we're staying in the Harrison, or was it the Harrison Valley? No, it's not Harrison Valley. I can't remember the name. It's a valley. Harrison Hot Springs is right there, which is where John Green was. And then we're staying within 15 minutes of Ruby Creek. And then you're not that far from like the Albert Ostman sighting. And like when you start really looking at it, this is the place where the Sasquatch moniker came into focus. Like people only know about it because of this area. And so that's the name. For me, it was always about John Green. And I've learned some things about John Green while I was researching this movie to some extent that I'm interested in trying to explore. I don't know if we're going to get to, but just as a person and how he was viewed by his family, that I'm interested in. It's not as positive as I would have expected. But I've always felt like Sasquatch researchers, especially those that get really deep into it, inevitably somehow destroy their relationship with their family. And that's important to me right now, because I don't know if it's just because of my son or my mom or what it is, but like, I'm sure I'm going to come at that from some sort of angle when I get into the narration of it. Anytime I can find a really personal angle to take on this stuff within the context of On the Trail of Bigfoot, it excites me, because that's the whole point of the series. Otherwise, we might as well just keep making spooky legend movies. It seems like that's going to be where I'm coming at this from. I know we are doing an ATV expedition one day that will take us around a place called Sasquatch Mountain. And then I know we're doing a nighttime boat ride down the river near there that I'm excited about. So those are the adventure things. But we're going to go to Ruby Creek. We're going to interview a lot of people locally. And the area is gorgeous. It almost reminds me, when I'm looking at it, it reminds me of like a cross between the Olympic Peninsula and like the Rockies.
Excited to see that as well. But listeners, make sure that if you're interested in the Monster Fest stuff we've been talking about at all, go over to smalltownmonsters.com, click on the Monster Fest tab, get all the info up at the top. But time's running out. It's June 2nd. Seth?
Yes.
Saturday,
June 2nd is June 3rd is the Monster Fest. Saturday, June 3rd is Monster Fest. June 2nd is the premiere at the Camp Palace Theater.
It's going to be a rockin' time. And if you see me there, listeners, please come up and say hi. I hope to see you in the podcast room. I'm going to have 1,000 stickers that I'm just giving away, because Monster Fest is where the people are at. So come up to me. Seth, always a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Become a supporting member of the Bigfoot Society podcast by going to www.patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society and receive extra episodes and early ad-free episodes as well. If you've got a personal Bigfoot encounter you would like to submit for me to share on the podcast, please head on over to www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. There you'll find the Share Your Bigfoot Encounter form a little lower on the page, and please take a minute to share as many details as you can. please state if the encounter is anonymous or what name you would like associated with the encounter. And as always, thanks for listening.